In the previous video, we took a look at integers which represented whole numbers. In this video, we are going to take a look at the float data type in Python. A float is used to represent decimals or fractions. Therefore, a float has a decimal point with one or more numbers to the right of that decimal point. A float can be positive or negative. Let's head over to PyScripter and take a look. Here in PyScripter, we're going to open up a new Python script and we'll remove the default code. And we'll create our first float. Float stands for floating point number. Set our variable to be height in meters and we'll set that equal to 10.5. Notice that we do not have to declare it as a float. Python automatically knows that this is a float object. We will print the type of our height in meters to screen to show that it is a float object. And we'll also print the variable itself. I'm typing variable there instead of height. We'll run our script and we can see it is of type float. Notice that we did not have to put a plus there to denote that it is going to be a positive float. We do have to declare when it is negative. So let's take a look at a negative float. We'll create a variable called longitude and we'll set that to equal minus 6.3628. We'll print the type of our longitude variable to screen and we'll also print the longitude value. We'll run our script and we can see it is another type of float, and this time it is a negative float. We see in the first example we had one decimal place, and in our second example we have 4. We can also explicitly tell Python that it is a float object. We'll create a variable called latitude and we'll set that to equal the built-in function of float. And within our parentheses we will supply in 54.098. Once again, we will print the type of our latitude variable to screen and we'll also print the latitude value itself. We'll run our script and we can see we have our float type and the float value. Similar to integers, we can cast from other objects to a float object. Let's take a look. I'm going to clear on the right here and we'll go back over to our script and we'll create a variable called string number and we'll set that to equal 25.075, and it is a string as it's wrapped in our quotes. Just to make sure it's a string, we'll print the type of that variable to screen. We'll then create a variable called float number and we'll set that to equal the built-in float function, and within our parentheses we're going to supply in our string number variable. We will then print the type of that float number variable to screen. Let's run that script. So we can see that when we printed our string number it was of type string. We then fed that string number into a float built-in function, which then cast it to a float object. In other words, we converted from a string object to a float object. Now this will only work if the string itself represents a number, either a whole number or a float number with a decimal. In this video, we were introduced to the float data type in Python. The float data type represents decimals or fractions. We saw how Python automatically knows when you are creating a float type. We also saw how you could cast from a string to a float. Below this video in the For You to Try section, there are 3 more casting options I want you to check out and note the results in your reference workbook. We will see more on floats in the operators section of this course, where we will specifically focus on numerical operators for mathematical equations.